Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Fools podcast. This is episode number 77. This film that we'll be reviewing today is a 2023 film called Fremont, and it's kind of like a more niche, lesser-known film directed by Babak Jalali, and I apologize if I mispronounce his name. But yeah, I randomly had heard about this film a year ago, and had seen it at kind of like it's like an indie theater. It wasn't really played or screened a lot at most major movie theaters. And I thought it was interesting. Both Chris and I are from the Bay Area, and one of the suburbs there is Fremont. So a little bit of bias, a little bit of kind of sentimental and nostalgia because neither of us live in the Bay anymore. And so anytime something Bay Area related pops up, generally we get to it. This is definitely not the first Bay Area film we've reviewed in the past. But yeah, for those of you who aren't aware, Fremont, California is in the East Bay, and it tends to have a very heavy immigrant population, especially with Afghanis, which is kind of the center of this film, is the main protagonist. She is a refugee from Afghanistan. So I just kind of wanted to get your initial thoughts, Chris. What do you think about this film?
Well, first of all, I'm not biased towards this film. I'll promise you that much.
No, I meant bias in terms of just any Bay Area related content.
Yeah. Okay, then yeah, I guess I am biased. I would say that this film, how to summarize it, it's every so often, every blue moon, I'll have a mainstream, let's just say moviegoer who likes, the superhero flicks and who likes the mainstream rom-coms. No, but tell me that like, oh, indie films are totally overrated. Like they just, they're not that great, but they're just indie because they're just a non-mainstream topic or whatever. This is one of those films where I see his point. It's like, this is such an indie film to be indie film, but like I ended up watching and being like, this is like, you remove like, I'm a refugee from Afghanistan and I have PTSD. It's like, okay. Like that's all it had. Like this movie was so mediocre that I was like, that's why these guys say this. Like because there's such thing.
It could be worse. I did see a movie a few months ago called East Bay, and it was way worse than this film. You should check it out.
I'm not watching that. Anyways, yeah, I have my time is very limited these days. But yeah, no, that's the way I would categorize is that like, because I usually always in those conversations push back and be like, no, I understand you want your fast food, but like a good independent film is like, fine wine, but this is definitely like fake wine. There we go. That's the analogy. So it's like, it was pretty bad. I mean, honestly, like this movie was, it was pretty mediocre. I would say like, if you take away the superficial aspects, which I think we'll talk about, like this person's story and like, probably what it's based on. The issue is that like, I still think even if you do that, and you want to be, nuanced and, give voice to the voiceless. I know what these directors do half the time. You still got to craft an interesting story and a compelling character. Like I didn't feel any connection to the character. And like literally my own family, my dad's side are refugees from a war too, and I was like, okay. And I actually know what PTSD does to, people who survive such historic traumas. And then like you base it in like the most bland city in like the Bay Area. So like you don't even get like the setting boost.
But but hold on. To be fair, that is more accurate because there are a lot of Afghani refugees in Fremont.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Indian Americans there too.
Yeah.
But
I think they were just trying to be more accurate. That's all.
Okay. And then but then they don't even lean into that. It's just based there. It's not like they talk about maybe some local like it was just a story about a poor translator who, was helping the Americans, who didn't realize that America often is full of BS. And then, as we know, America left Afghanistan abruptly, but there was never going to be a clean way out given the mistakes of, 20 years ago. And yeah, I mean, she had a lot of, she had the survivor syndrome issue, PTSD. I mean, she had all the checkbox of what happens to somebody in this circumstance. And in that regard, okay, you want to do a modern take on a modern situation, fair. But I would just, I mean, before I let you go ahead, I would just say that, like, during this film ended up just being a story about how even though those things happen to you, you deserve still a piece of happiness. And that's, I mean, I could have written that in like a short essay. Anyways, go
Yeah,
ahead.
fair enough. Yeah, I think more of the powerful which aspect of the film, which I think a lot of people who immigrate here is just trying to find a sense of belonging, because it seemed like she never really found her place or anything that was kind of fulfilling. Like you said, she was still trying to get over her survivor syndrome from escaping Afghanistan when a lot of people obviously were killed, and that was a I mean, we both lived through this time of going to the war in Afghanistan, so you hear like a lot of stories. So it's kind of like it's not in the forefront anymore because a lot of things have happened, like Ukraine war, like what's going on in Israel. But like when we were kids, like Afghanistan and Iraq wars, they were very kind of prominent. And I think when this film came out, we had just pulled out of Afghanistan or had done so like a year prior. So it was a little fresh. I think that's what they were trying to tap into with this film. But I think with like a lot of immigrants, like they kind of struggle when they first like come to a new place and trying to like, you know, trying to transition. And I think they did a good job with that in the main character, because she never felt like she fit in or found her place. She wasn't really dating anyone. She had a lot of struggles, and a lot of that was tied to PTSD, but a lot of that is also, trying to adjust to coming to a new country where it's very different culturally here versus Afghanistan.
You know what gave me PTSD is seeing the Fremont BART station. Waiting to use that one all week.
Sorry, that's a little joke for people in the Bay Area, because if you're not from there, yeah, at least when we were there, it had a reputation for the public transit station with like the most carjackings. It is just not. The BART is not the best transit system in the world. I will tell you that much.
It's crap. But yeah, I was I was waiting to use that one, dude. Yeah, that was a good one.
You know what gave me PTSD was her saying she's going to Bakersfield.
Yeah, that was funny too. I was like, okay, that was cool. Also, seeing the actor that plays the bear, I was like, oh my goodness, dude, I can't see him as a mechanic. I'm like, you're a chef.
Oh, at the end,
yeah. But okay, going back to some of the interesting techniques they use, right? So I did think it was interesting how she works as a fortune cookie. Well, at first she actually works as just
the fortune cookie writer.
Well, that's when the other person passed away. Mm-hmm. Before, I think she was just assembling them, right, with the other.
She was making them,
and then she became the writer. I thought it was interesting how the therapist had it be a way to her express her thoughts.
Yeah.
I also thought her white friend was pretty funny as a comedic. It was interesting how the tonal shifts were like very serious, and then like she was
all over the place a little bit.
Yeah, that how she was there to be basically the comedic relief. I thought I was dying when she's like, "Yeah, I'm getting my mother to like, her own room because you can't be sleeping next to your mom when you want a guy." I was just like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, she was a lot.
Yeah.
What did you think of the dynamic with the neighbors who kind of, I think they I can't remember if they lived above or to the side, but they were also an Afghani couple. I think the husband was kind of abusive.
Yeah, he was abusive. Oh yeah, because you're right. I mean, she mentions it to her doctor, right? That like, even though she's with her community, she feels very isolated from them because they all have different opinions, right? Either they're busy with their own stuff, or they resent people like her who are helping the Americans.
Yeah, which they did.
And so, which also finds it very interesting because then they choose to live in America. But
yeah, which is a little ironic.
Yeah, but so she felt very isolated. I would say my take on that is like it's not too dissimilar with like when you study different historical moments in different groups where like depending on where you were, what you were doing in those situations in those countries, your dynamic here is very different because like, you know, you don't carry that baggage like per se, in the sense that like other people in the community, like when I say other, I mean like non-Afghanis, but within your community, you probably know what they did, their role, and what their opinions were, and like that probably doesn't dissuade you from you know, like what they say, turning the page. People hold those forever, right? So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, fair enough. What about the only other character from our community you really get to know is it's someone who gives her advice, and I can't remember if it's the uncle or oh my gosh, do you know who I'm talking about?
You're not, you're talking about
It's
the
that guy
neighborhood,
who smokes quite a bit.
or the restaurant.
No, no, no. I'm thinking about the guy who they had kind of several conversations on like the stair or the balcony area.
Balcony, right? I think it was in. I don't know. I think for sure. Well, for sure it's the neighbor. But I don't know what, because I remember
Yes, yes, it was the neighbor. The neighbor.
yeah, the Afghani, she like obviously talks to the couple, but he talks to him a lot and the restaurant guy a lot, which I thought was interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah, the restaurant guy. They were like they had so many scenes of them watching TV.
Yeah, the soaps. I like
Which
how
I
he's
can
like,
relate to. I was like, oh man, that's like Mexican culture too. They always have the novellas on.
what's funny is he's like, if you tell me about watching this, yeah, like I was dying. So,
Yeah.
so what, you had a question about it? Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess my question for you is like, I guess like, what drew you to this movie? What did you like about this movie? And like,
yeah, I think what I liked.
did anything resonate with you? I guess like you know.
No, I think it's like the typical kind of immigrant struggle. I thought it was kind of unique in that it's the Bay Area. So a little bit of bias uh, in my life is like years ago, and where I went to undergrad. They had a famous author, Khaled Hosseini, who wrote The Kite Runner and a bunch of other books which focused on like Afghani stories and on refugees, specifically in the Bay Area. And I really liked his writings. And so this kind of like reminded me of that a little bit in nostalgia sense. Not that this was the best film, but it was interesting just seeing, I guess, like an immigrant try to navigate through and try to find their way. And I'm sure we both know quite a few immigrants who've moved to especially the Bay Area and have had some difficulties trying to assimilate. Because a lot of immigrants tend to stick to their own cultures or communities and never really try to branch out, which I think the main character tried to a bit, especially when she was trying to, take a chance and put her phone number on a fortune cookie. But aside from all that, the storyline, I did enjoy the cinematography. I thought it was like pretty well shot, especially when she was going through Central California. Made it look a lot nicer than Central California really is, in my opinion. So that's kudos to some of the cinematography shots.
Oh, that reminds me, the odds that like the fortune cookie, she writes the phone number, ends up in her boss's wife's party is like,
yeah,
that's typical. Like, what's the term? Like the ex machina, we're making the plot work.
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, it took some liberties. The plot wasn't always the strongest, but I don't think that was necessarily the point. And it was a little. What do you think of the vindictiveness of the Chinese Chinese shop owner's wife, sending her, making her believe someone wanted to see her down at Bakersfield?
Yeah, that was I can't say I didn't see that coming because like her reaction to like the fortune cookie incident was like
very negative,
very like also stereotypical, like
yeah.
like basically if like I was because I am non-Chinese, if I was non-Chinese and I was writing the script, I would be like, you know what, a Chinese wife would, oh, this person made this one mistake, I must crack the whip, you know, like it was very like I mean, maybe that is the reality for many Chinese Americans in this country, but also I could see how maybe you would have just said, let's have a talk, this is unacceptable, this happens again, you're like
not doing this petty narcissistic move.
Yeah, and like she shows up and like obviously, I mean, like I wasn't even shocked. I was like, cause first of all, like my head was going like, okay, you're driving all the way out for a date, and like
she's desperate, man. She wanted to find a connection.
I know, but she found that connection with that mechanic randomly, which I will say that's the one thing in this film that I think is good. Is
the redeeming quality?
Yeah, is that it shows you that it's at least they're trying to show you in the film that like in life you really can't like predict or force like
Can't plan
how
it.
you can't plan it. So like even though she's planning to go on this blind date, she really ends up connecting with this car mechanic who I guess supposedly they find each other attractive, but it's like the most awkward thing at times. But okay, fine. But whatever, at least the friendship minimum, right? And she goes to that thing just to pick up the thing that her, I guess, boss's wife wanted picked up because she didn't want to pay anybody to pick it up. It's also like a stereotypical Chinese American trope, dude. Actually, if I was Chinese American, I'd be offended by this movie, dude. Okay, like maybe we're frugal, but like really, like, like that's really all the character did was.
Yeah, there's a lot of stereotypes there.
I was like, geez. But so I will say that was one of the redeeming qualities of the film. I think another thing to ask is like maybe I don't know if there was their intent, but it's something I picked up on is like how different immigrant groups, even though they might have some similar, like you said, like issues with the simulation and stuff, how they actually treat each other. That was one thing that I didn't know if the film was really going for that, but I found that interesting.
No,
too.
but it is dynamics that came about, and it's true. Like there's a lot of groups that don't really like each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Bay is a melting pot. So like that is something a dynamic we have both seen. There's like certain people don't want to associate with other people, even though they're immigrants.
Mhm.
And it's interesting how the mainstream Anglo-Saxon point of view is like all immigrants are kumbaya, and I'm always looking at them like,
No.
what is wrong with these people?
Wrong. Yeah. Well, it's because they don't know these people. Just assume they're all homogenous.
I actually have a story on that. So I was playing a rec sport. This happened the other week, and we had a drop in because we didn't have enough people on our roster, and this guy, he's Indian American, and he's just like, oh, this person really helped us. This person helped us. She was like, she said she was only playing for 3 months. I didn't believe it because she was pretty decent. Anyway, so she leaves, and he goes like, yeah, she was definitely like Spanish speaking, right? Spanish, right? I was like, dude, she's definitely not from Spain. She was probably from like
No, but that's a New York thing too, which is where you live. Haven't you ever heard this before?
No.
Anyone who's Latino, they're like, yeah, they Spanish. I've heard that before. I'm like, this is so dumb.
It's so dumb, dude. I was just in my head. I was like, dude.
It's like, brother, Spanish is people from Spain. But no, that's the only place in the U.S. I've heard that before. Is like, you hear in the media, like people who grew up in New York, yeah, they'll refer to Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Dominicans, or whatever, they Spanish. And I'm like, no, that is such a stupid. I'm not surprised by that.
Drives me nuts. Like I have not been hearing that, but what I will say is that I was just
yeah, but you don't hang around a lot of people who grew up in New York. But yeah, if you hear like people in interviews or like I've heard this before, and I'm like, this is stupid.
It is dumb. Anyway,
so I mean, you watch Flagrant, like Alex on there, like he grew up in New York, even and Schultz did before he moved out. It's like, oh yeah, he's like, we used to call anyone who was kind of Latino Spanish, and I was like, wow, New York or something else.
That's too much, yeah. But I was just like, okay, but yeah, my whole point is that like, when you group them all, even though they might not even like each other, like it's unbelievable.
Yo, you want to hear a good one? I'll never forget this. Remember when España won the World Cup in 2010?
Mm-hmm.
I remember they had kind of like a watch party back in the Bay, and I remember hearing at this point it was some like sports radio, a guy, clearly some like a white dude who was talking. He's like, yeah, he's like, big deal that he's like, it's amazing Spain. He's like, but I don't understand at the Bay Area celebration why there weren't Mexicans and all the other Latinos like there supporting Spain. I was like, that is the stupidest comment I've ever heard.
That's pretty bad, dude. That's pretty bad.
I remember like my jaw almost dropped. I was like, that was the most ignorant thing I've heard in a while.
That is funny,
like they have a very tumultuous history. Yeah. Most people can't relate to Spain who are from Latin America.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting week because that was the week that when they won, I remember like my stepfather had a tough week that week because everybody was congratulating him, even though if they knew that everybody in the household was rooting against Fade, that would have been like they would have been like, "What the hell?" Oh,
Yeah,
dude,
that's more to the point.
when Iniesta scored the goal, he turned off the TV. I remember. I was just like, "Oh, so we're not even gonna watch this celebration." Okay, so we all went to our rooms, and then he didn't even talk for like a month about sports. Dude. This was like, damn. Yeah, but now when they won the last year, I joke. Now it's my inside joke. I'm like, "Oh, champion, what I gave you the shirt?" And he's just like, "Okay, don't waste your money, because if the shirt arrives, it's going to the trash can immediately. I already know." So
it's got to be burned to keep us warm.
But it's
anyway, yeah. But to your point, yeah, this film inadvertently, I would say, shows kind of some of those dynamics.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's just too far in between. Like, I think this film had a hard time creating a. So I think even let's remove like my biases.
I know. I would agree with you. Even some of the tone and the pacing was a bit off in this film, or all over the place.
I think in the end, like I just couldn't really connect with. I could connect with the story, but not the particular character. You know what I mean? Like, but it was like
Sure.
weird. Where like, okay, this story is like actually overlaps with some of my own family story. But like, how come all these characters? I just feel like you just made them up in your head. Whoever wrote the script,
They kind of did.
and like,
I think the main character wasn't necessarily. I could believe her, but like even her coworker, some of the others, I'm like, all right, this is a bit over the top.
It just felt like these are caricatures, and it's like a real story. Like this was based on a book. I have a hard time believing that she would have that kind of friend. Like it's just weird to me. I was just like, why don't you just talk to a real Afghani like person, get the real story, like from a New York Times article even, and then make that a film. It just felt like it was like, oh, these are all my preconceptions of what this person would be going through, and how they fit in America, and boom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that's why it's a not a good film.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways that they could have made it stronger, for sure. It was a bit underwhelming in many aspects.
Yeah, I mean, it was very underwhelming in my opinion. So,
all right, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not a ton to this film. Like it's pretty linear. Hold on. Actually, before we get to that, what did you think about the therapist? Because I actually didn't mind him too much.
He was the best character in this movie.
Like he was kind of like dry funny. I don't know why.
I will say that was interesting how like she shows up on somebody else's appointment and they're like, that's not how it works. And then like, she gets in the door.
I will say that is very like immigrant-y. Like that's something
yeah. Yeah, that is so immigrant-y. Like, you just
something like my grandparents would have done.
Yeah, like here, you just go. Like I have the slot, it's yours now.
I'll never forget. You want to hear something that like just tripped me up? I remember years ago, my dad was telling me, he's like, that this is probably back in the 80s. Someone like he had some family from Mexico come visit, right? And they were this was the most like Mexican thing I've heard, especially if you grew up in like rural Mexico. And he's like, there's somewhere on the east side of like San Jose, and he stops at the stop sign, and it's like a Sunday morning. He's like, there's no one on the road in like the 80s, and he stops at the red light, and his cousin's like, hey, what are you doing? Just go. And he's like, no, we stop at the red light here. And he's looking around, he's like, but there's no one else here, just go. And he's just like couldn't fathom the rules. I was like, that is very I could see a lot of immigrants having that kind of similar response.
Yeah, especially if they grew up in a rural area, even like rural America. I bet they're probably like, "What the hell's this city life?"
Yeah, well, that one cracked. Well, it's less common here in the U.S. because most places have like streets on the road. But if you've ever driven in like Mexico, man, it is a different world.
It is. It's a different world.
Anyway, all right. Oh yeah, we can get into the final ratings.
I'm trying to think. Like, I will say this. When they give you the first backdrop of like her apartment in Fremont, I was like, yeah, that's Fremont.
Yeah.
Even you know how it is, like how like the Bay has built apartments with like especially with multi-level, they have like the outside stairs.
Yes.
Where you walk up. I was like, that's so. I was like so confident because I never see that here. I'm like, it's like it's so funny.
No, they don't have that down here either in the South.
It's like a very like West Coast style of like apartment.
Bay Area specific. Well, some LA too. I've seen them in LA.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him in San Diego, but I would say, yeah, Bay Area, but like I just like put California. So I found that like interesting. I was just like, yeah, it just got me thinking to like, yeah, I don't see like these apartments where like, you go through the gates and then you walk up to your,
No, it's
your
like down here in the
stairwell.
south, like what you see a lot for kind of older apartments are like brick. You're not going to see that in California.
And here, I mean, you already been here, but you already know that like here, like they just love their elevator, which I understand because you got to move your whole apartment and fucking.
Yeah, they're a lot bigger too in New York.
Yeah. Well, they're built. Yeah. Up. Yeah. So but yeah. No, I think we get into ratings. Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So this film was a genuine masterpiece that got me really.
Riveting.
Nah, this movie was one that I already forgot about. Like as soon as I watched it, I was like, wow, this is the definition of like. I go back to I won't repeat the whole story, but that first story I said at the beginning of the pod is
The definition of mediocre.
Is exactly like if you show that. So this is the type of movie that when people who don't like indie movies end up somehow watching, it just reinforces their bias against indie movies. They're like,
sure, yeah.
I was like, because they'll just say that what I just said superficially earlier, like, oh, this is just a story about trauma and immigrant.
If you think this is that East, they made me like, do I really want to watch another indie movie? Like that, it was that bad.
That's why I'm not watching that. But I mean, we've already done a lot of good indie movies in this.
Yeah, I know. We're just saying now we're picking stuff that's not of the upper echelons.
Yeah, which I think it's fine. We got to expand the pot a little bit, but there's got to be something though. Like this was like I'm grasping at straws where I'm like, oh, they showed.
You made me watch The Secretary.
I like that movie though.
Terrible movie.
I like that movie though.
That was awful. I was getting mad watching that movie. I'm not gonna lie.
I like that. That movie was like really like it's the kind of like edgy movie I like. Oh, you're gonna hate this.
It was terrible. Everything about that movie was awful. I hated that movie.
Wait until I pick this other controversial one. Anyways,
it's not the controversy. It was just the directing style. The lines were awful. Anyway, never mind. Well,
had limited budget,
so did this one.
Yeah, this one was just trash, though. Anyways, yeah.
You can't do that. You can't say, oh.
Other one got me. It was exciting, at least in the romantic sense. This is like dull. Actually, that's why it was black and white because they're going for that. Anyway, so my rating is.
What did you like about, or did you like the choice of going black and white?
No, I mean unless they're going for like this is a adult film, black and white. Dude. Yeah, I'm here with a solid 4.5 out of 10.
Yeah, fair enough. I thought the tone was a little slow in this movie. It felt a little kind of all over the place, and kind of like slow build up. Like obviously, I think the big kind of momentum turning point was when she decides to put her phone number in the fortune cookie, and that kind of accelerated things a little bit. But honestly, like I didn't mind her performance necessarily because the script was kind of weak. But I thought the main actress actually did a pretty good job within her role, kind of seeming aloof. Not really finding any joy in a lot of things, suffering from PTSD. So I'll give her credit. I think she did a good job within the role, within the confines of that. Jeremy Allen White was just kind of a random. They just threw him in at the end as the love connection, which was kind of like I get what they're going for. Like you can't, like you said, you can't really plan everything in life. But it was just so random because he got like 5 minutes of screen time, if that, and he's like a major like character. And you're right; they definitely did just build up all the stereotypes of sort of Chinese immigrants too, which is funny because I obviously like I realized that, but it's not until you said it that I fully picked up. I was like, yeah, you're definitely right; they did do that, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I think for like a lot of reasons we talked about in like the slow pacing, I lost interest quite a few times in this film. I will say. I did think some of the cinematography was pretty good, and that was besides her performance and some of the shots. There's not too much going for this film aside from that, so I have to give it a 5.5.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm looking at who wrote who directed it was a Iranian British director.
Yeah, and one of the other writers is Italian.
Yeah,
which is like okay.
It's like, well, that explains half. Like, yeah. Like you're not even giving me like actual like is that like, you get? It doesn't even say like based on whatever expose in the New York Times book. It's literally like imagination. Like literally, you could
Yeah,
tell.
they should have had Khaled Hosseini kind of oversee this. I like you could look him up. He's pretty famous.
Hmm.
And for anyone out there who's like, don't let this dissuade you from like Afghanistan, should check out Khaled Hosseini's books. I've read all three.
This is the Kite Runner guy, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I would say "In the Mountains Echoed" was probably his, and that was his third book. Was my favorite. But yeah,
No, I bet. No, that's fair. I mean, I haven't read the Kite
but I
Runner.
mean, it's like this guy, this author, Khaled Hosseini. He went to Santa Clara, but yeah, he grew up in Afghanistan, moved, and then moved to the Bay Area. So and was like a doctor, and then went back to writing after. Like he should have been the one overseeing this project.
But I think, like you said, it's too low profile, and they didn't
Yeah,
want to.
agreed.
And like you said, his books are well known, and I
And
think they
well
made a,
received.
and I think they even made a film out of one of the books, right?
Kite Runner, which
Yeah,
is not that great.
yeah. So, but I mean, like he's done the movie thing. I feel like the authors. It reminds me of Californication, where like they have this whole plot line where like the guy makes his film. It's crap books, but he's disillusioned with like how movies end up butchering books, and like
Yeah.
he's just like he makes a joke. He always rips the director who directed his movie with like he basically took a half decent book and made it somehow trash. He's like, damn. So he doesn't even rate his own book, but he's like, I'm gonna rip your movie even worse, dude.
Gosh,
Yeah.
I did not. I remember being so frustrated watching Californication.
One of my favorite shows.
I didn't like it.
It represents LA to a T.
Yeah, I know, but if you're gonna do that, you might as well just watch BoJack.
Okay, but that's next level.
Because I said I was like California or BoJack is Californication with like way more depth.
It's because the difference, in my opinion, between okay, we'll have to end the pod in a sec, but the difference between those two, in my opinion, is Californication obviously had the actor power. Obviously, it's an actual TV show, but I think deep down they glorify.
In the show, yeah, and where in
LA.
BoJack they critique it.
They critique it. They understand that what they do is so freaking weird and abnormal at times that like they, like you said, they're self-referential critiquing it, which is why I think it's the next level. While like I think from a mainstream show, like I understand, like you could have the perspective.
I was not a fan, and that's probably why, because it did seem like they were glorifying. It was like
they
too
did.
much.
I love glorifying California, as you know. So
and he was just so pretentious. The main author was just so pretentious and thought he was better than everyone else.
Oh, wait until I pick a Woody Allen movie, dude. You wait until I pick a Woody Allen
God,
movie.
dude. I might have to get a lower score than this.
Dude, I'm thinking about pulling one out for the pod. I haven't finished the movie because it's so pretentious. I was dying.
We can't watch it. He's problematic, dude, because he smashed his adopted daughter.
Yeah, great filmmaker though. Well, he's known for some great films, but like I want to pick the one that he's really like. So what's interesting about him? Okay, I'll end on this. Is that it's like his like whole directory suite is like basically like I think early Woody Allen is probably his best stuff, and then once he gets kind of too famous and he does like stuff that he just nobody says no to him to, he ends up doing sometimes films where the main character straight up talks like pretentious New Yorkers. And it just like drives me nuts. But at the same time, I just want to like pick one movie so we could just talk about pretentious New Yorkers. Yeah, but I couldn't finish it because the guy is like one of his characters is like giving an expose about how like art has died and like only real artists understand music. I'm like, I can't do this, dude.
See, but that's like pretentious in like an obnoxious way.
Yeah, it's so annoying, dude. But yeah,
like one can argue Birdman's a bit pretentious, but it was just done so well. And that's probably my bias because it's one of my favorite films.
Yeah, it's done well, but I would say that like I think the pretentiousness is actually just part of the story they're trying to tell. I think the problem with some of Woody Allen's work or
it's just pretentious for the sake of being pretentious,
or even glorifying being pretentious. Like, oh, this is cool. He's actually enlightened. It's like, dude.
Well, you know what it reminds me of, and this you will probably agree to a T. A lot of these films are styled. If you could summarize them as one person, it would be Bill Maher.
Yep. Yeah, Bill Maher. Yeah, like it has to have this opinion and feel greater than life, dude. It's unbelievable.
You ever see him interview Bill Burr? Which is the best. Oh man,
On his podcast, right? That got viral, right?
Yeah, because Bill, it was so funny. Because Bill
He's
Burr just like shatters him so much. It's so funny. Because Bill Burr's like your guy's guy, kind of blue collar Boston. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like Harvard. He's like, I know that's like your Vatican City, and I was dying.
That's so good, dude.
Ugh.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, because Bill Maher always gives off that vibe that he's just so pretentious. He acts like he knows better than everybody, which is what I think a lot of these films you're talking about basically do. They glorify.
100%, dude. 100%. And we'll do one of those eventually, but my backlog is kind of fat right now. So
yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, I think we're done with this week's episode. So if you enjoyed our commentary, and we'll be sure to pick better films in the future, and we'll give better ratings. Please like and subscribe to our channel, and see you next week. We're out.